There you go. Okay, great. Welcome all to the third in the series of webinars to prepare you for hopefully successful applications to the Kids Brain Health Network RFA process. In the first, we went over sort of a lot of the basics of what we're looking for in these applications. In the second webinar, we focused particularly on family engagement and stakeholder engagement, and that was presented by our KT Core, Kids Brain Health Network. And in this third set of webinars, we're going to focus on a key element to a successful application, and that is partnerships or key partnerships. And it's really a pleasure to have three panelists join us. First, you'll hear from Colin Deacon, who is on the board of directors of Kids Brain Health Network. Next, we'll hear from Anneliese, who's at the KT Core at York University. And finally, we'll have a free-for-all, an open question and answer, hosted by Joseph Ferenbach, who's at the University of Toronto, who directs a program in translation of research into the medical realm. So this is going to be a very exciting presentation. Both of the previous webinars and this one will be recorded and are available online for those who missed it or just want to hear the pearls of wisdom once again. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our deputy or associate chair of the board, Colin Deacon. Over to you, Colin.
I think, Dan, vice chair or chair of vices, it's whichever you want, it's actually the title. But really glad to be here, and this is the core of what Kids Brain Health Network, why it exists and what it has to do. We've got to find ways to enable the best researchers to enable their knowledge to be translated into effects in families and in kids' lives, and that's why we exist. We're here to deliver benefits to Canada. That's what the NCE Secretariat expects of us, and certainly is the predominant focus of the third cycle. If we're so fortunate as to get that third cycle funding, it's the focus of that funding. And so as an organization, we look at it pretty simply, that we aren't in a position to serve families and kids, but we know lots of organizations that we can partner with, that we can enable them to be even more successful in their efforts if they have access to the knowledge that we have in our network. And that's really a source of great excitement. And for me, as an individual who spent my life as an entrepreneur, working predominantly with universities, my current business is unrelated to this field. It's in the world of dentistry, but I've got partnerships with researchers in 24 different universities around the world that has really helped our company to succeed and to help us get the best clinical and research insights out into clinical practice on a broad-based basis. And it's been good for business in our company. It's been good for business with the partners that we work with, which are major multinationals. And it's been great for the scientists that we work with and for the clinicians that we work with. So all can align, and I believe that, and I've seen it. And it's not easy, and that's where I think we're really lucky to have this session on and a focus in our organization, that we learn how to help each other find the partners that will bring insights to us about what their priorities are, and that we can help them address their priorities in ways that will ultimately better help all the stakeholders in the system, including parents of kids and kids with neurodevelopmental disabilities. So I'm a very passionate believer, as Dan knows, in the need for us to help our researchers to develop effective partnerships and to be aware of the challenges around applying the knowledge that they have access to. But I'm a huge believer in the fact that we could do this exceptionally well, and that if we do, we are going to be making differences in lives that are just beyond our wildest dreams, and the parents need us to do that sooner than later. So that's my little pitch, as to why I feel so passionate about the need for us to find ways to really help our researchers bridge their knowledge into helping our partners address their priorities. And I've seen it work, and I know it can work. So thanks, Dan.
Great. Thanks a lot, Colin. Well, I thought we'd open it up to a little question and answer, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Great. And let me say in advance of this, I hope all of you online are planning to come to the Kids Brain Health Network Day at our Brain Development Conference on November the 9th in Toronto. And this has been actually all of the principals who have been organizing this day are here at the table right now. And what we invite you to do is at the end of this call, this webinar, to invite your partner to come to this day and to sort of take in what is Kids Brain Health Network and the role that the researcher and the partner and the family members can play in this joint effort. So let's open up for any questions that folks may have for Colin. Doug has given you the wherewithal of how to join in the conversation.
You're no longer constrained.
Right.
And you're free to ask a question or raise your hand, and I will open you up to ask your question verbally.
And I'd offer, if you've got concerns, if you feel uncomfortable about this direction that that KBHN is taking, please just voice that, and let's talk about it a bit and learn from one another, because this is a direction that we can make a big difference in, but it's not going to be easy, and there's going to be bumps. But if we don't look for them, and if we don't try and help each other address them, or bring clarity where it's needed most, then we won't succeed. So if you're uncomfortable, please let's talk about it and let's figure out how to do that.
We have a question from Penny Corkum.
Hi, Penny.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you.
Good. My question has to do.
Can you speak up, Penny? Sorry.
Is that any better?
Oh, much better.
Yes, much better.
Okay, sorry. So I've been involved in some commercialization steps, let's call it, with a company around e-health interventions, and it's exciting to do this. One of the challenges, I think, is working within the university structure. So, for example, for Better Nights, Better Days to move towards commercialization, we had to have an interinstitutional agreement with 7 different universities, 7 different lawyers. It took 2 years just to get that one contract. I'm trying to move the contract to the next level now. Our legal counsel at Dalhousie has left. We're using external counsel. I mean, this is going to take me years. So while I think it's a great idea, I feel very bottlenecked by the policies and procedures that we have to follow. And it can, I think we'll get there, but we keep talking about the timeliness of things, and I guess if you have any advice about how to work within these structures and still be timely.
Penny, you've just raised a hugely important point, and that's the realities that some of you have to deal with in your existing structures. One of the things that one of the things I've found toughest about ILI or industry liaison offices is that I think they are a barrier to generating community development opportunities, or the opportunities from the application of knowledge, because they're trying to protect that knowledge. And that's contrary to where the Kids Brain Health Network actually is at as an organization. Our obligation is to get knowledge mobilized and out there, not to protect it. I have different views about this from a commercial standpoint than a lot of entrepreneurs, but I'm really reticent to put in strong IP protection or IP licensing agreements in place. I'd rather find ways to get knowledge out there faster and maybe protect a tiny element versus the whole thing. I don't know what to say about your specific circumstance, because they are all specific, but I would love to have a conversation, Penny, with you knowing some of the players involved, and maybe we can find a way to break through, and if we do, we can share that knowledge. When we find problems like this, Dan, I think it's one of those things that, this is what takes all the wind out of somebody's sails. I mean, it's I can feel the discouragement in Penny's voice because she knows what help she can provide. And we've got to, as an organization, find ways to break through in that. And it's not easy, but maybe there's places where we can find some successes that are working and share those. And maybe there's places where we find a problem like this, we can pool together some resources, meet with the ILI office, meet with Penny, and say, come on, let's break through here. What do we need to do? You guys are a barrier, and you don't want to be a barrier. Let's help you fix this. Sorry, Joseph, you want to say something?
Yeah, Joseph has a comment on this important point.
Well, I don't know if it's an important point. I mean, this is something that in Toronto, at least, we have no end to, because we have essentially one of the most convoluted systems that's geographically based, but also is based on where your appointment is, and there's university IP versus hospital IP versus, you know, whatever else. Increasingly, the model, though, around North America there's been talk about doing more unencumbered IP projects. And I think where the opportunity for the network here, and I'm sorry, I'm an outsider, but I'm just sort of, I know little bits and pieces. Universities, as far as I can tell, are anxious to figure out new models. At the U of T over the last 5 years, we've seen huge progress in terms of moving towards not actually being an IP hoarder. Our partnerships office has increasingly been trying to encourage entrepreneurship by stepping back and being much more open to different types of collaboration. And when there is money involved, it's been my experience at least, the directors are open for conversations. So as funders or as a network, maybe as people are starting their work, there is a conversation to be had in the initial contracts of talking about unencumbered IP, because other funders are doing it.
Yeah, that's right. And I've worked with a couple of universities in the United States that have actually got out of the business of protecting IP. They just want to get it out into the community, and they know that the benefit to the university is going to be much larger in donations and other commitments to the university over time and contracts, because of the benefits that the mobilization of that knowledge is generating. So, Penny, I feel very clearly that this is an energy zap for you, and that makes it a problem for Kids Brain Health Network. So I don't know how we fix it other than I'm going to be back in Halifax in the next little while. I'd love to have a conversation one-on-one, and let's see if we can find a way to break through on this specific issue and sort of bring people together and then use that as an example to help others.
Yeah, Colin, from the Kids Brain Health Network perspective, as an NCE, we're not allowed to hold IP, so we don't have any skin in this game,
yeah,
which creates a really nice situation. I think one of the key elements of an NCE is a nimbleness and an ability to move around roadblocks, and Colin and Joseph's input are really helping us think about how to move around roadblocks, and all of those online should have that same feeling. And Joseph, another thought?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about partnerships here, and it seems to me this is a really interesting opportunity for a partner to have a voice. If they're bringing something to the table, they actually have a lot more bargaining leverage than we sometimes assume or think with universities. So again, at our IPO office here, increasingly companies that are bringing money to the table are able to say, no, we do not want the university to hold any IP if this goes through. If you don't want our money, then fine. And the office has been very open.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great suggestion. Okay, it's about 9:20 now Pacific Standard Time, and this is time to turn it over to Anneliese for Knowledge Impact Canvas. And how one can utilize our resources and this Canvas to make a difference. Anneliese, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. Is my audio coming through okay, Doug?
Yes, we hear you well.
Okay, super, thank you. Okay, so I would like to present to you the new tool that a lot of you have heard of that the KT Core has developed called the Research2Impact Canvas. And what this is basically a KT planning light tool. The idea is that if you're successful, you will already have an outline of a great KT or commercialization plan that we can build on and do deeper KT planning, like what we did with our high impact projects. And for those of you new to the network, you won't know what those are, but essentially we're planning to do a deep dive KT planning for the successful projects. Okay, so what I'd like to talk to you today about is why would you use the Research2Impact Canvas? And then I'll run through how do you use it, and also talk about how do you use the value proposition template in the context of the Canvas, because I realize this is all probably pretty new to you. So first of all, why would you use it? So I just want to explain to you where I'm coming from with this. So we've talked a lot about partners and stakeholders and that kind of thing, and really, you know, if our goal is to create value for our stakeholders, which it is as an NCE, because we're trying to achieve impact, and you can't achieve impact if you're not creating value for stakeholders. So if that's our goal, then we really need to talk to our stakeholders, find out what their needs are, which will inform the solutions that we create. It'll inform the policy and practice changes, and it'll be, while working with partners and our end users, we will necessarily be making this, the products, either the knowledge products or the commercialization products, context relevant. So this is actually a framework from the field of business analysis. I didn't make this up. This is a proven model, and if you're missing even one of these elements, you're going to fail if you're trying to achieve value. So it's very important to have all of these elements, and each element is defined by the other 5. So the reason why there's lines that intersect all of them is because they all interrelate to each other. So this is why it's so important that we talk to stakeholders and start with their needs. So the way that I define stakeholder in my work is anyone who's directly or indirectly affected by the work. So there's the general population. So not everybody is going to be interested or affected by the work. So there's a smaller subset of our stakeholders, the policymakers and practitioners that would use our work, and the parents and self-advocates and the children who would be affected by the work. And then there's even more specific target audiences. Maybe there's occupational therapists, speech language therapists, or more specific groups of target audiences that we also call end users. There's other names in business. We call them customers. And then there's the industry and community partners. And a lot of times, actually, almost all of the time, these industry and community partners have their own networks of these target audiences that we can leverage to gain greater traction in a shorter period of time. So just some general types and categories. This is not an exhaustive list at all, but just to give you sort of a flavor of what I'm talking about, when I talk about end users and target audiences for Kids Brain Health Network specifically, we're talking about parents, children, self-advocates. We're also talking about practitioners, or the people who provide services in various forms to the parents, children, and self-advocates, and also the policymakers who make decisions that affect, what gets funded and what services are available and how those services are delivered. When I'm talking about partners and talking about people who have skin in the game, as we heard Dan talk about, and there's a deliberate reason why I'm using these words, and you'll see later why I'm using this phrasing. But there's industry partners, healthcare organizations, service delivery organizations, and any other kind of community organizations that really are interested in working with us to the point that they've contributed either in kind or cash, which is what the NCE looks for. So there's different types of roles for stakeholders. So for the end users and target audiences, they very importantly can inform the design of your research project in your KT commercialization project. So I'll talk about this a little bit and how that's operationalized by using the Research2Impact Canvas in a moment. Also, they will be the ones who are going to use your products, whether they're commercial products or knowledge products, such as clear language summaries or whatever else you're producing as a KT product. They can also be advocates for you. They can spread the word if they like what you're doing and if they really believe in it, and we've already experienced that with some organizations. And they're also going to be the ones that are considering how to implement the research outputs into practice and policy, and that's called Uptake. So partners, as I mentioned, they can also contribute to the research process, the methodology, the creation of products, and sometimes we use terms from business analysis called agile, where you develop a prototype and then you go to the target audiences or the end users and you say, okay, give us feedback, and then you revise it according to that feedback, and then you provide it to them again, and there's this ongoing iterative cycle. So they're not only do they contribute cash and in kind, but they also contribute expertise, and they can help with stakeholder engagement and things like that. And they can also spread the word to their established networks, so their social media channels, or maybe they have product distribution networks that you can leverage to get your work out there as well through those channels. So why would you use it? Well, it's like a bird's eye view of your KT plan. So it's actually a really innovative tool that's new to the field of KT, where it's actually the first KT planning tool that allows you to plan your research activities alongside your commercialization and KT activities, which I really believe is important because you really can't separate your research activities from your KT or your commercialization activities, because your research informs your products, and your stakeholder engagement as a form of KT will inform your research and will inform your products, so you really can't separate them. You can also make changes more easily on a one-page document that rather than writing a 40-page document and then having to go back and make changes. It also helps you to see, by taking that bird's eye view, it allows you to see how all of your project elements interrelate and inform each other. So you can see whether there's things that are missing, and you can also see how they interrelate and inform each other. And you can also use it to find partners, but I don't think we'll have time to get into the details about that today, but you can feel free to contact me at another time and I can explain that to you. So the benefits to the KT core, as I mentioned before, this will be a really great outline to have should you be successful at getting funding for your project. This is a really great start for us to be able to get into some deep dive KT planning, because it provides a really good foundation for that. The benefits to Kids Brain Health as a network, it helps you to make sure that you've allocated appropriate budget for your KT and commercialization activities alongside your research activities. From my personal experience, I've noticed that when I review research grants and I'm asked to give feedback into the KT plans, often, almost always, the KT activities are not budgeted for. And especially going into year 9 and 10, we want to make sure that those activities are given appropriate budget allocation so that they can be accomplished. It also makes sure that you will consider and include all the necessary elements to achieve impact, and it maximizes the potential of the network to get specific examples or stories of impact so that we can maximize our chances of success with the Cycle 3 renewal application. So this is David Phipps' KT lead, and this is his framework that's called the Co-Produced Pathway to Impact, and it's been adopted by the network for the last 4 years. Underlying this is a logic model, but really what I want you to see in this is the pink circle, which is you, the academic researcher, and the intersection with the policy and practice partners. So these are all the stakeholders that you're engaging with throughout your research. And I would like you to notice that the oval, these two ovals actually go from like all the way through the whole cycle, all the way to impact. So you're going to, basically what this means is you're going to be engaging. Remember I talked about agile and how you'll be doing ongoing stakeholder engagement to make sure that what you're doing is actually relevant to the end users. So you're going to be constantly doing that throughout the research cycle, to make sure your research is relevant, but also dissemination. A lot of times we think, oh, you know, it'd be really cool to do a video or an infographic, right? But it's really important to ask your end users, is that actually what they want? Because, you know, from my interactions with the healthcare providers, they actually, I remember an example from a previous job that I had where they actually wanted a reminder card that they could put in their lab coat pocket that they could pull out and look at to reference. And so making an infographic for them would be really not useful. So this is another way where engaging stakeholders is really important and listening to what their needs are. And then, of course, uptake is where the end users are considering how they can use what you've done in your project in their own practice. And implementation is when they actually use it. And so all of those things are necessary towards achieving impact, although we do recognize that impacts can happen along the way. So the arrow for impact goes all the way back to the beginning because it could inform new research and new products and new forms of uptake and implementation, but there also are there could potentially be ongoing impacts for the end users during this whole process that we go through. So how do you use the Canvas and the value proposition template? On July 19th, I sent out an email that contained the Research2Impact Canvas in 3 different forms. I sent out the links and also the PDFs, and also a template, two different templates to craft a value proposition. And I realize this is a new thing for a lot of people. So I just wanted to walk through how to use that. So first of all, if you haven't seen this yet, it's the stakeholder needs environmental scan that the KT Core worked on for an entire year last year. So we interviewed parents of children with neurodevelopmental conditions, so FASD, ASD, and cerebral palsy. We also interviewed clinicians and other frontline workers and service providers who help these families and policymakers to find out what their needs are, because if those are our stakeholder groups and our end users, we have to ask them what they need so that what we're doing is actually going to be useful for them. Remember that diagram I showed you about this, with the 6 elements, and how we need to talk to our stakeholders to find out what they need so that the solutions will create value for them in their own context. Well, this document has identified 44 stakeholder needs, and ideally your project will be the solution that will address that need, or more than one need if it's appropriate. And then in that way, that creates value for these stakeholders, and they're going to be more likely to use it. And if they're going to use our work, then that means that we're going to be able to achieve impact. So the way that you start using the Canvas is to start at the top left-hand corner and identify the stakeholder need from the report that you're going to be addressing. So I realize there's not a lot of space in here to write all of them out word for word, but you can always just list the numbers. If you have 4 or 5 needs, or even 1 or 2, and they don't all fit in here to write them, you can just put the number of the focus area. They're all numbered in the table. And so identifying what is the stakeholder need that you're going to be addressing, and then thinking about and articulating what is the impact that you are thinking is going to happen, or what you hope you will achieve from this project. So the short-term impacts are things that can be achieved within less than 12 months. Medium-term impacts are things that will occur between 1 and 5 years. And long-term impacts are things that take longer than 5 years or longer. So those would be your policy changes and things like that. Medium-term, example of a medium-term impact might be implementation of best practices, or application of best practices, depending on what kind of best practices they are and how close your relationship is with the partner organization. And the short-term impacts could, those are tough. And you may not be able to foresee any short-term impacts, but those could be even things like, benefits to the participants in your research study, health benefits that you're seeing as the study is unfolding. Those are just some examples. It's certainly not limited to that. So then the first box you want to start with is identifying your target audiences. And as I mentioned before, they're also called customers or end users. So broadly, you can be broad at first and say, well, okay, healthcare providers, but you may also want to get more specific, so occupational therapists and physical therapists, depending on the need that you're going to be addressing, of course. So then you go to box number 3, and this is where you want to put your value proposition. So you need to identify the value proposition for each of the target groups or the end user groups that you're going to be trying to impact. So this is where your value proposition canvas comes in handy. So the first template, you would identify the end user, so who's the people. So you would say, you know, whatever, occupational therapists, or if you wanted to get specific, or you could even just say healthcare providers who need, you know, whatever the problem is. So what is the need that you're addressing? So you've already identified the need as the first step. So what is the need that you're addressing for them? And then the solution. So the solution is what your project is doing to solve this problem for this stakeholder group. So the second template is pretty much the same thing for this particular end user, for healthcare providers who, you know, have this need, is a, you know, whatever the device is, or whatever the, you know, the innovation is, the, you know, social innovation, or whatever it is for that you're producing from your project to address that need, and then you know, that, you know, results in whatever, and explain, you know, how your work will provide a solution for the end user's needs. So it doesn't matter which template you use, it's just whichever one you feel most comfortable with. So here's an example of a value proposition statement. So for healthcare providers who need to acquire specialized in-depth training in autism, CP, and FASD, our project team will create an online training course in 10 modules containing self-assessment and references for further reading. Okay, so that's very specific, and that's a robust value proposition statement. So now that you have that, the important thing to see, there's a method to my madness here. The reason why you want to do that is because, first of all, like I mentioned, you want to make sure that you identify the value proposition for each of these target audiences. But in between all of this is how you're going to then engage with your stakeholders to co-produce the solution. So when I talked earlier about that agile process where you're going to constantly have this iterative process of engagement with your stakeholders and make sure and create a prototype, go back to the stakeholders, say give me feedback, test it, and then do another revision of it and another. That's part of your stakeholder engagement. But you could also do there's many other types of stakeholder engagement that you could do. But those would all be listed in box number 2. In here, in the dissemination and communication box, is where you would list first of all, what are the outputs? So the output would be the online training course, the module or whatever, and maybe a manual. Could include peer-reviewed publications and presentations and stuff like that too, whatever the outputs are of your work. And then you also want to importantly, again, say how you're going to interact with these stakeholders, but in this way, it's a different way. This is the communication part. So the stakeholder engagement is more of a listening thing. The communication part is more of a telling. So this is your dissemination. So how are you going to leverage the networks of your partners and your target audiences and all of that stuff to maximize the reach of your work? So this could include focus groups or online discussions or any other type. We do have a stakeholder engagement guide that's available on our SlideShare channel, and I'd be happy to send that to participants after if you'd like. What it contains is 3 tables that identify the different types of stakeholder engagement that you could engage in with your stakeholders. So this is only 2 examples. There's many more. So for example, outputs, and also how are you going to disseminate it and communicate with people. So this is another way where you would be asking people what are their preferences for receiving this information. Maybe they want email, maybe they're not on social media, or maybe they're on a particular listserv and you can, for their group of, maybe through a professional association or something like that. But you have to ask them to find out what are their preferences for receiving this information as well. So this is what it looks like, and the reason why these 4 boxes are above the uptake and implementation box is because they inform the potential for uptake and implementation. So essentially what this means is you need to ask people what they need and make sure that what you're providing them is what they need, and then they will want to use it. So that's all it says. It's very simple. So and then you can just write some sentences here about how you imagine that your stakeholder groups will actually consider and implement what you have produced in your project. So then you want to go to the other side of the canvas, and this is where you want to list 3 different things. And I know there's not a lot of room here, but this is very high level. So first of all, what are your research project activities? What are your KT activities? And if it's applicable, what are your commercialization activities? And then you want to get really specific about what you need to be able to do everything in box number 6. So you might need a PhD student, you need postdoc, you need some technical expertise, graphic design for the online modules, you need some OT and PTs willing to test, or whatever it is you need. And then for your key policy and practice industry partners, the reason I need to just clarify here, by using the word key for in front of the word partner, in no way am I diminishing the importance of the stakeholders that are listed in box number 1. All of the stakeholders are very important. The only reason why the word key is used here in front of partners is just so that you're not listing every single organization you've ever talked to. This is just for your partners who are going to be your key partners who are ideally contributing cash or in-kind to your project. And really, a more simple way of thinking about it is if you didn't have these people involved in your project would not succeed. So, for example, for this online module, if you didn't have this company who can actually do this work and deliver the module to you, then you wouldn't be able to do it. So some more specific examples of key project and KTE activities are here. And again, you would relate that to the key resources that you need. And there's examples on the different versions of the Research2Impact Canvas to help you with this, and I'm here to help you as well. Now, all of these relate to number 9, which is the budget. So really, number 9 is what are the resources, what's the money that you need to be able to do everything in box number 6 and to be able to acquire the resources in box number 7. So you're going to want to put the amount of money that you need, and also you want to list here what is the contribution from the practice or industry partner. So they may be contributing cash, or they may be contributing in kind, but each of them will have a dollar value. So you can see here that by listing your research and KT and commercialization activities in box number 6, this ensures that you're properly budgeting for everything so that everything can get done. So this is what the whole thing looks like. Really helps you to see how things interrelate. Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions for clarification. My contact information is here, and I've been providing individual advice on people's KT plans and their proposals, so please feel free to email me your Research2Impact Canvas along with your proposal, and I will review, and then we'll book a telephone call to talk about feedback. Okay? So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, Anneliese, actually, we don't have time for questions. We want to turn it over to Joseph. But any questions that emerge? Yeah, Joseph? Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Oh, my bad.
We're unmuting you in just a second here. Yeah, unmute. Yeah. Yeah.
It might be a good idea to take a couple questions, because if this is a tool that's providing, setting up materials for the research grants that are before the workshop, if anyone has pressing questions, I think it's probably a good idea to ask them.
Okay, sure.
Hi, we have a question from JP, Jean-Paul Colette.
Yeah. Can I speak now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Anneliese, thank you. It was very useful, and I had seen this empty template without understanding the meaning. I have one question regarding the initial graph describing the link between research, dissemination, uptake, and implementation, which is when you see this sequence of circles, you feel that research is what has been done, And then after that, it is really the KT aspect, where how to pass it into practice. But for a project like ours, which is a KT project based on research, if we define research like something which is to be passed into practice, it is a fixed content that is now being put into dissemination. So the circle of arrows that goes back to from the end to the beginning, like if it is a continuous process, does not fit well with this definition of research. So my question is, for projects like that are really KT projects, only KT research, there is no research development of new knowledge, is the research definition based on the research you do in context of the KT in order to inform the stakeholders about the progress. So then there is more work toward the good direction. So it's a KT research within the KT project.
Okay, so you're doing, okay, so what you described right now sounds like stakeholder engagement. And if it's a KT activity, a KT-based project, and there's no research per se, then I mean, I think the tool still applies because, like I mentioned, it's there are going to be academic outputs, so academic products or outputs, but there's also going to be KT outputs and commercialization outputs. So anytime you're creating any kind of product, it's important to engage with your stakeholders, and it sounds like you're doing that. So I'm not sure. Can you maybe ask your question in a different way? If I haven't answered your question appropriately, can you maybe rephrase that so that I can understand what you're asking?
Maybe we can go offline with that just to open up the airways for others who may want to. Yeah. Okay. Other questions, comments, thoughts?
I'll just offer one from my perspective as being a non-academic, listening and hearing, and I really respect the detail with which the KT core goes at this. I look at things a lot more simply, still having a lot of university partnerships and industry partnerships around the world. And really in business, there's an expression that the sale's not complete until the value has been delivered. And I think as a customer, if you think of yourself as a customer and think of that expression, that's how we all feel. If we don't get what we've been promised, if we don't get the value we need, we're not happy. It's the deal's not done. And I think that's true in research as well, that the application of research is something where it's sort of been left to others, but I think there's a tremendous amount of benefit in researchers understanding the needs. So I look at things just a little bit differently. I don't look at it as benefits as much. I look at it really wanting to understand the needs of those who, if they used the research, the knowledge you've created, if they used it to its full potential, what needs would those be serving? And understanding and exploring those needs gives you some tremendous opportunities to harness the vested interests of that partner organization to help you move your research into practice. So if they've got a strategic priority that's related to your research will be pulled into their organization. So really focus on their needs and helping them to serve that need. And if you do that, your partner organization will be helping you to serve the needs of the stakeholders. That's how I've succeeded. They're the only way I've ever succeeded in business. Lots of people are way more successful than me, that's for darn sure. But with my limited abilities, that's the only way I've got by. And so I just offer that as a sort of a simpler way maybe to look at the more all-encompassing perspective that has been offered.
Great. Thanks a lot for that input, Colin. Are there any other comments or questions from the floor, our virtual gathering? If not, if you have some questions to gestate, let them do so, as I turn it over to Joseph Ferenbach, who's our Director of Translational Research Program in Health Sciences at the Institute of Medical Science at the University of Toronto, and also co-director of the Health Innovation Hub there. So some thoughts, Joseph?
Hi, everyone. Well, as I understand it, part of the reason I'm here is because our program is going to be involved in helping to facilitate some of the discussions that will be happening during the meeting in November. And I really wanted to start out with, we've heard a lot of terms and things thrown out. Increasingly, we're seeing that researchers are being forced, some of them dragged, to go and interact with people outside the lab. And some are really good at this, and some are not as good. And some people chose the lab because they didn't want to go out and interact with business and industry. So I wanted to get a sense of, from the people that are here today, what kind of experiences have you had in terms of partnerships? What is this effective partnerships? It was something that we were talking about or was talked about earlier. What does it mean to you? So maybe if there's somebody on listening can address this. Who out there, and I'm putting this out there, can speak to what is a partnership? Because I'm serious. It may seem, and maybe there's some hesitation, it may seem simplistic, but we actually, in preparing for this, had quite a lengthy discussion of what is a partner.
We'd love to hear from anyone.
No hands are coming up yet, Joseph. Maybe let that sit with them.
Well, in order to understand, I guess, what you're going to be putting in that canvas, it's very significant to understand who are the partners you need to be approaching, and then to start understanding how do you access or assess their needs. And I think Colin was very spot on. It's not so easy to really understand people's needs without actually spending time and talking and engaging with them. And so as you are preparing your proposals, one of the things that's quite important is understanding which partners to target and what makes a good partner. One of the conversations I've recently had with a researcher who was actually trying to get a collaborative network off the ground was that when he first did his initial write-up and his proposal, there were tons of hands up. Right away, everyone was jumping on board. This was great as long as they could somehow share in the money that was brought in by the idea. But when it came right down to it, the second they actually received the money and had to do reporting and had to do a bunch of the administrative stuff, people started dropping off. And that's when he realized that, and one of his learning outcomes for this in the future, if he were ever to start another sort of large collaborative network, it would not be with a free-for-all for partners. It would be with a select small group of core. And this is where the word skin in the game came in to the discussion. People that aren't just necessarily there to put their name on a grant or a proposal, but actually want to delve further into partnerships. So the question is, how do you know if and when someone is serious? Have you been in situations with industry? Do you have any idea of how to approach industry to essentially verify that they're going to be involved at various stages of the process? Because I agree with Colin, it makes a huge difference to have a receptor at the end of this. It makes it much easier if you are consulting with them throughout the process, and used words like development. And that is one of these design words that can actually mean a lot of different kinds of things depending on the partner and your intent. So I'm going to put it out again. What does partnership mean as your understanding? Because you're going to have this understanding to apply.
Yeah, maybe Lonnie, who always says very wise things, if I could pick on you to sort of address Joseph's question out there about challenges with partnership. What does it mean to you? Who do you bring to the table? Is that okay if you're there, Lonnie? We're going to unmute you. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, you got the phone on there.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry about that, Lonnie.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
No.
Yeah, we can
I'm
hear
using
you.
Yeah, sorry.
He's still getting feedback.
Is he getting feedback? Oh.
That's okay, Lonnie. Let's pick on somebody else. Lonnie's size, though.
Let's see. There's oh, Derek left.
Pia. How about Pia?
Okay.
I'm here.
Yeah, Pia, you have some comments?
Well, I come to the webinar because exactly I find out to...
Let me just, the rationale being...
We're losing Joseph. Oh, Jesus, this is just not working well.
to make them useful and to make them something that can contribute to what you're doing.
Delay with comment.
Try it again, Joseph.
Am I live?
You're live, yes. We
Okay,
can
great.
see and hear you.
So that's one of the things. What would be useful in terms of engaging with partners and based on your previous experiences? One of the things we've found in the past that has been interesting is to talk about, or at least think about, a charter with partners. In project management, people do this in terms of team charters, setting out what are the ground rules, or what are the ideas, what are the needs and perspectives and roles up front. That is challenging if you want to do it in a very detailed way, but in terms of setting out sort of the broad strokes of why are people being involved, or why are partners becoming involved in a research project, is very significant, because it tells you a little bit about their expectations. And knowing their expectations helps you understand what it is they're expecting from the partnership.
Joseph, that's really important. I often work with three things. What are your values? What are the opportunities that you're focused on? And what are your capabilities or competencies? And if you do that for each of the two partners, you find the areas where those overlap for each one. And they're different, obviously. Hopefully your values are the same and the opportunities you're after are the same, but your optimal partnership is one where those two are the same, and you've got competencies that are that work well together. And having that discussion is really important. And last is, just don't ever underestimate the importance of understanding from them what their strategic priorities are, because if you're tied into their strategic priorities, you're going to be pulled in. And partnerships have to be good for both parties, or all parties involved, I guess is really what I mean to be saying. This is not about one party winning and another party losing. This is about harnessing each other's vested interests in a way that provides some big new opportunity, and we all can find them. We can all do it, and we don't need to make it complicated.
Well, and one of the things that I've suggested in the past, where we've used, is simple questions like, what do you want? what do you need, and what is a must-have. Just answering it that way, you get to understand what your partner is looking for and what they're willing to compromise on. So sometimes if the must-have is IP, again, getting back to the earlier conversation, then it's something that should be done up front and have a talk with your partnerships office. And then you know in advance kind of some of the expectations, which is very important. And ultimately, partnerships are about relationships. And unfortunately, there's no precise science. They can get messy. It's about keeping lines of communication open and keeping people involved and participating within the research. And that's, they become stakeholders, skin in the game, which is very important.
Yeah. So you know, all those who are listening, we're here to help you construct a better application, particularly relative to partnerships, which will be high on the scorecard for adjudication. So we have Joseph, and we have Colin, we have Anneliese. Please pipe up with any questions that are nagging at you, and we'd be happy to take them, and we can go past the hour if need be.
Unfortunately, I have to go, Dan. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I got your email.
You've got great advice and great people there helping.
There is a question
Yeah, we got a question from Vicky Galea.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I'll just throw myself in here, as I always do. I don't have any issues when the partner is a healthcare facility or a hospital or a health organization, etc. I do have issues, and I have tried to do this before, is when the partner is an industry. Especially if, you know, it's an industry where you've actually had a relationship from the perspective of using their products for, you know, a huge amount of your research life. And you've got this great idea and you want them to participate, and you're getting a lot of pushback from the perspective of, and what you begin to find out is that they're a very risk-averse industry, okay? And they're demanding things from you that, hey, you know, for God's sake, I'm a freaking neuroscientist. You want me to come out with a whole big business plan for 5 years? Well, okay, I'm done. So any advice from there? I don't have the facilities or the knowledge or the staff to come up with a 5-year business plan that's going to make them $1 million a day. So where do you go from there?
Well, to be honest, I mean that's a question. That's why the program that we've developed exists in a sense, because one of the things that, if you look at some of the literature around translating or moving ideas forward, is that it takes multidisciplinary groups of people and teams, and that's so the partnership then becomes something more than just you and the industry partner. There may need to be a third kind of partner, which is more of somebody who facilitates the translation. You need somebody that can understand the bigger landscape and can leverage other networks. That's what, I mean, these are buzzwords, but essentially the idea behind where our students are coming from is that they learn a little bit about IP, a little bit about business planning, a little bit about engaging with networks, but also have some background within the science so that they can be the facilitators. Because the reality is, and this isn't just sort of Canada-wide, it's a global problem. When you talk to people that are doing translational medicine in Europe or translational science in the States, the scientists that are doing the work at the bench don't always have the resources, facilities, time, or even interest to delve into business planning. Because the second you start doing that, you lose the momentum of the research.
Yes, exactly.
But I think this is where the network and the applying for grants that are asking for partnerships can be invaluable, because then you can put in room for some of the kind of expertise that you will actually need to mobilize the research. I would argue, and I haven't checked with anybody obviously, so I'm speaking for myself, but if you are being asked to outline your partnerships, you're also being asked to outline the resources you need to maintain those partnerships and make them functional.
Okay.
It's Anneliese here. Thanks, Joseph. Can I just add to that? I just wanted to point out one thing that I didn't mention when I was presenting the Research to Impact Canvas is actually that's an adaptation from a business tool called the Business Model Canvas. And the Business Model Canvas is a one-page outline of a business plan. So if you can use the Research to Impact Canvas, you can write a business plan, or at least understand what needs to be done.
Oh. Okay, well that's a good hint, thanks.
If you do actually Google search for Lean Startup Canvas, Business Canvas, there are a number of them that will pop up that will look very similar and can help out. Increasingly, businesses aren't necessarily interested in 40-page documents for business plans unless you're talking about much further along and much bigger pots of money. Initially, they want to see a plan that's easy to digest.
Yeah, can I just add to that? I think. Yeah, I think if you have any questions, just to avoid confusion, because I think if you get into the Business Model Canvas stuff, you might go down a rabbit hole.
So what sorts of skills or what sort of engagement? Sorry?
Go ahead. I think you cut out.
Oh, okay. So what sorts of engagement tools or ideas, so this is, I hear one really important thing right now is that how do you access the expertise to be able to engage with partners? At least that's what I got from the question. Are there any other kinds of questions or how do you find partners to begin with?
Sorry, Joseph, can I just quickly mention to the last person that made a comment about wanting to know more about business planning is I would actually have to suggest that instead of Google searching for business tools, just contact me, because you may go down a rabbit hole and just get confused and frustrated. So just contact me and I'll help you.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
We do have another question from Pia Wintermark. I'll bring you in, Pia.
Yeah, my question was if you approach a pharmaceutical partner as a company, you know, how do you make sure they get their interest, but without, you know, them influencing your result or your analysis, or you keep your intellectual property, you know?
That's a huge issue and question, and this is my own sort of recommendation is don't do it alone. That is one area where the university business partnerships offices have contracts and lawyers. From the U of T experience a number of years back, as some of you may remember, this is a very real and legitimate problem, where sometimes it is not in the best interest of a company to make research known, or so it is very important from the onset that there are contracts in place that do guarantee academic freedom and integrity.
Okay.
Great, thanks. Did we may have lost Joseph again. Joseph, are you frozen? So are there any other questions while we try to break through this technical logjam here? If no more questions, I'm going to give it, you know, once, going twice. I would really like to thank Anneliese and Joseph for their fabulous conversations. Anneliese, that was a great presentation, and I would mention that this partnership engagement activities are going to be going on at the NeuroDevNet day of our conference, and so stay tuned. And as Dan mentioned before, it would be highly recommended for individuals that are have standing partners or are developing a partnership to come to the conference and invite your partner to join us, and we'll explore these things together. That said, I really appreciate your attention, and I look forward to hearing more questions. And just send your questions in to David and Anneliese, or Jan Willem and Andrea Cross, and or to funding@neurodevnet.ca. All right, thanks a lot, and I look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar.